My name is Fonda Ferrell. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a structural engineer. I calculate how much weight a thing can carry before it breaks. Last summer, at my parents' 40th anniversary party, my mom stood in the living room I had been quietly paying for since I was 26 and announced to a room full of relatives that my brother had done more for this family than I ever could. She said it with one hand resting on a granite countertop I bought. She had no idea whose name was on the deed of the house she was standing in. She had no idea what I had signed at 9 o'clock that Tuesday morning. But here's what none of them knew. The folder under the gift table, the notary waiting in the second row, the little ceremony my parents had planned for me that afternoon. All of it was worse than anything I had imagined. And what I did about it ended 40 years of family tradition in under 4 minutes. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally say the things families don't want to hear, and where every story is about the moment somebody stops paying for love that never arrives. If you've ever been the one who carried everything and got thanked for nothing, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the Sunday dinners. Every Sunday for as long as I can remember, my family gathered at the house on Cardinal Lane in Dayton, Ohio. Pot roast in the winter, grilled chicken in the summer. My mom, Carol, ran that table like a stage manager. My dad, Ray, carved the meat and kept the peace. I drove over from my one-bedroom apartment across town about 20 minutes, usually with dessert and usually with a toolbox in my trunk, because something in that house always needed fixing. I inspect bridges and buildings for a living. I look at structures other people trust without thinking, and I find the cracks before the cracks find them. It's careful work, quiet work. Nobody applauds a bridge for standing there. The refrigerator on Cardinal Lane was my mother's newspaper. Anything she was proud of got a magnet. For 4 years, the front page was a clipping from the local paper with a photo of my brother Dustin helping set up a farmer's market booth. He'd carried folding tables for an afternoon. He got photographed doing it, and that mattered more than the tables. When I made senior engineer at my firm, I mentioned it at dinner. My mom said, "That's nice, honey. Dustin, tell them about your idea." My promotion letter never made the fridge. I told myself it didn't matter. I was 26 when I learned exactly how much my place in that family cost per month, and I'd been paying the invoice so long it felt like gravity. The fridge was the family newspaper, and I had stopped reading it years ago. Looking back, that was my mistake. I should have kept reading, because the fridge is where the first warning finally showed up. 8 years ago, my dad fell at the machine shop. He was 55, a CNC machinist with 30 years on the floor, and he came down off a loading platform wrong and crushed 2 vertebrae. Surgery, then a second surgery, then a settlement that mostly went to the hospital. The shop let him go with a handshake and a sheet cake. Disability checks replaced a paycheck, and the math at Cardinal Lane stopped working within 6 months. I found out how bad it was by accident. I stopped by on a Tuesday to drop off soup and saw the envelope on the kitchen table before my mom could slide a placemat over it. Yellow paper. County seal. The word foreclosure in letters you could read from the doorway. They were 4 months behind, and the bank had stopped calling and started writing. My mom cried at the table the way she cried in public, chin up, dabbing carefully, checking the room. My dad stared at his coffee like it owed him something. Dustin was 21 then, living in the basement between plans. He squeezed Mom's shoulder and said, "We'll figure it out, Ma." Then he went downstairs to play video games. I sat with the notice and a legal pad and did what I do at work. I measured the load. I checked the numbers twice. Their equity was real but thin, their income was gone, and no bank on earth was refinancing a disabled machinist and a housewife. There was one way to keep that roof over my parents, and it wasn't a loan or a prayer. It was me. I drove back to my apartment that night, opened the savings account marked with my someday house, and stared at it until 2 in the morning. Saving the house would empty my future to do it. Here's what most people don't understand, and it matters for everything that came later. I didn't pay off my parents' mortgage, I bought the house. There's a canyon between those 2 sentences. A lawyer I consulted that month laid it out plainly. If I just handed my parents money every month, I'd be pouring my savings into an asset I had no claim to, and one missed payment later, we'd all be back at the county's mercy. The clean way, the only sane way, was a sale. So that's what we did. I bought the house on Cardinal Lane for $180,000, its fair appraised value. I put down $20,000, every cent of my someday house fund, and took a 15-year mortgage for $160,000 in my name alone. At closing, a title company checked every lien, insured the title, and recorded the deed at the county. Fonda Ferrell, sole owner. My parents walked out of that office with the bank paid off and $30,000 of equity in their pocket. They stayed in the house. No rent, no lease. Family being family. My dad hugged me in the parking lot and couldn't talk. My mom smoothed her coat and said we didn't need to mention the details to anyone. I thought she was embarrassed about the foreclosure. I understood too late what she was actually editing. By the following Sunday, she was telling her church friends they'd refinanced. By Christmas, the story was that they'd had a rough patch and gotten through it. The Ferrell way, together. I stood in that kitchen holding a mortgage with my name on it and listened to myself disappear from my own rescue. The erasing started that first week. I just didn't know yet how far she'd take it. For 8 years, the arrangement ran like this. On the first of every month, $2,000 left my account for the mortgage because I wanted that loan gone early and I paid it like I was mad at it. Every year, about $5,000 more went to property taxes and insurance. When the roof aged out, I wrote the check. When the water heater quit on a Friday in January, I had a new one installed by Saturday noon. I kept renting my one-bedroom across town with its rattling baseboard heat because my down payment fund now had a family living in it. And the $30,000 my parents cleared at closing? Within a year, 25 of it went to Dustin's food truck. Gourmet grilled cheese. He named it after Mom. She told everyone at St. Bridget's her son was an entrepreneur. The truck lasted 14 months, died owing money, and the whole subject just evaporated. The way Dustin's failures always did, like breath off a mirror. Meanwhile, the family group chat had its own economy. Dustin shows up with $30 of pizza, that's a photo. Dustin drives Mom to a doctor's appointment, that's a paragraph with heart emojis. I replaced the furnace motor, wrote the tax check, patched the porch step, and none of it existed, because a wire transfer doesn't smile for the camera. I noticed something in those years that I couldn't unsee. Whenever money came up near my mother, she changed the channel. Fast, smooth, like a hand over a wound. At first I thought she felt guilty. Later I wondered if something else was going on, something I didn't have a word for yet. Why would a woman work that hard to not see the person holding up her house? It took me 8 years to get the answer. One person in that house saw me, and she paid rent nobody asked her for. My grandmother, Ruth, my dad's mother, moved into the back bedroom the same year I bought the house. She was 78 then, small and sharp, with opinions about everything from pie crust to the county commissioners. Officially, she was there so we could look after her. In practice, she looked after me. Every few months, an envelope would appear in my purse in her slanted handwriting. For the roof, for the taxes. Don't argue. $20, $40. Pension money she'd skimmed off her own groceries. It wasn't the amount, it was the arithmetic behind it. Someone in that house was keeping my column of the ledger, even if she kept it in secret. Ruth grew peonies along the back fence, big sloppy pink ones, and on summer evenings she'd sit on the porch steps and make me sit with her. One of those evenings, my mom was in the kitchen window telling somebody on the phone about Dustin's newest almost job. Ruth watched her for a while. Then she patted my knee and said, "Being needed isn't the same as being loved, honey." I laughed it off. She didn't. She looked at me the way I look at a load-bearing wall with a hairline crack, and she said, "Don't learn that as late as I did." I asked her what she meant. She just nodded toward the kitchen window, toward my mother's silhouette, and let the peonies fill the silence. I was young enough then to think she was talking about herself. It took me 6 more years to understand she was reading my blueprints out loud, and by the time I understood it, she wasn't there to ask. Ruth died 2 years ago, at 84, in the back bedroom with the window open to her peonies. At the funeral, Dustin gave the eulogy. I'll give him this. He was good. He told the story about Ruth teaching him to fish, and half of St. Bridget's was in tears. And my mother sat in the front pew receiving condolences like a woman accepting an award on someone else's behalf. Nobody asked who paid the funeral home. I did, quietly, the way I paid for everything, and I'm not saying that to complain about $4,000. I'm saying it because of what happened in the church basement afterward, over ham sandwiches. My Aunt Deb, my mom's sister, squeezed my arm and said, "Isn't Dustin something? Ruthie would have been so proud of him." And I stood there doing math I'd never let myself do before. I was 32. I lived in a rental with someone else's name on the building. Every dollar I'd ever saved toward a home of my own was buried inside a house where my contribution was a rumor at best. The person who kept my ledger was in a casket. What did I actually want? Not the money back. I wanted one sentence, said out loud in front of the family. Fonda held this together. That's it. That's the whole want. It's embarrassing how small it sounds. So I made a plan that felt like a bridge repair. I would pay off the last of that mortgage early, and at some family occasion worth the moment, I'd finally say it myself, gently, with the paperwork done and the drama over. I rehearsed the sentence for 2 years. I thought the last payment would buy me something, and it did. Just not what I thought it was buying. Last spring, the ground started moving under Cardinal Lane, and at first it just sounded like old people talk. My dad at Sunday dinner cleared his throat and said they'd been thinking about getting their affairs in order. Wills, paperwork, that kind of thing. Sensible, at 63. Then my mom set down the gravy boat and took her run at it. "We've been thinking about the house," she said. "It should really have Dustin's name on it too. It's only fair, sweetheart. He's the son." They had floated this once before, 3 years back, and I'd said no then too. I want to be clear about that because it matters later. I was never asleep at the wheel. I kept every closing document, every tax receipt, every insurance statement in a fireproof box in my apartment. When they first asked me to add Dustin to the deed, I told them, politely, that the deed wasn't a greeting card you sign, and the answer stayed no. So this spring I said what I'd said before. "The house is handled, Mom. Nobody needs to worry about it." Something crossed her face, fast, like a shadow over a field. Then the sun snapped back on, and she smiled too quickly and said the thing that should have made me run. "Well, your father and I have our 40th anniversary coming up in July. We're having everyone over, the whole family." She reached over and patted my hand, which she had not done in years. "And we have something special planned." My dad looked at his plate. Dustin toasted with his soda can. I drove my 20 minutes back across Dayton telling myself it was a cake and a slideshow. Her smile stayed with me the whole way home, sitting in the passenger seat like weather. In April, I made the final payment on the house on Cardinal Lane. 8 years of $2,000 a month, 7 years faster than the loan required, and then a number I'd been staring at since I was 26 finally read 0. There was no ceremony. A confirmation screen, a reference number, and 3 weeks later the recorded lien release showed up in my apartment mailbox between a takeout menu and a dental reminder. The county's way of saying, "Paid in full, owner, Fonda Ferrell." I sat on my kitchen floor and read the whole thing twice. My cat, Rivet, walked across it, which felt about right for the level of recognition I was used to. I ordered a pizza and ate it right there on the floor. And I let myself feel it for one night. It's done. You did it. An entire house, free and clear, before 35. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with the family group chat, which was celebrating something else. Dustin had a new venture. Selling fitness equipment online, ground floor, huge margins. My mom had typed a wall of praise with her signature 3 exclamation points. Nobody in that chat knew that 4 miles away, their daughter had just finished carrying a $180,000 structure across an 8-year span. And honestly, that was fine, because June was coming. The anniversary party. The whole family in one room. I decided that would be the moment. Not a gotcha. A gift. I'd stand up with the lien release in an envelope tied with ribbon and say, "Mom, Dad, the house is paid off. It's safe forever. Happy anniversary." I rehearsed how I'd say it. I rehearsed the hug afterward. I never got the chance to use any of it. One Sunday in late May, 7 weeks before the party, the furnace on Cardinal Lane died with a sound like a dropped wrench. Nobody froze, but Ohio doesn't stay warm, and a house needs heat by fall. The technician quoted $4,800 for the replacement. I stood in the basement with him, took the estimate, and came upstairs to tell my parents I'd handle it before winter. My mom waved her hand like I'd brought up something faintly rude. "Not at the table, Fonda, honestly. Always with the money." That's what she said. To the person replacing her furnace. Always with the money. I sat down and ate her pot roast and said nothing, which was a skill I had by then the way other people have a mortgage, built up over years, painfully, one payment at a time. 20 minutes later, Dustin arrived, late, cologne first, carrying 2 pizzas nobody needed since dinner was already on the table. $30 of pizza. My mother stood up. She actually stood, wiped her hands on her apron and clapped. "There he is, look at him, thinking of everybody." She took a photo of Dustin holding the boxes and sent it to the group chat while the pot roast went cold. My dad chuckled along because the alternative was noticing things. I watched the whole scene like an inspector watches a stress test, and I remember thinking, with professional detachment, there it is. That's the whole system. In one room. Cash flows in silence. Charm flows in applause. After dinner, as I rinsed plates, my mom appeared beside me with a dish towel and her voice pitched low, the tone she saved for managing people. "Leave those, sweetheart. Come sit. Your father and I have been talking about the house." We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, under the light fixture I'd rewired 2 summers ago. She started soft, the way you'd talk someone onto a ledge. The house, she said, was the family's whole legacy. She and Dad weren't getting younger. Dustin needed a foundation, something solid under him, because the world was harder for young men now, and he had so much potential, and family takes care of family. Every sentence was as a hand gently pushing me toward a door I couldn't see yet, and maybe it was the furnace quote in my pocket, or the ribbon I'd already bought for the lien release. But for the first time in 8 years, I asked for the thing I actually wanted. I kept my voice level. "Mom, before we talk about Dustin's foundation, I need you to say one thing for me. Just once. Who kept this house? All these years, who kept it standing?" She looked at me, and I watched something harden behind her eyes, like water going to ice in real time. Maybe honesty felt like an ambush. Maybe the ledger was somewhere she could not afford to look, because of what else was written on it. She stood up, pressed both hands flat on the granite I'd paid for, and raised her voice for the benefit of the living room. "Your brother has done more for this family than you ever could." The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the den, my dad turned the television up. I looked at my mother, standing in a kitchen I owned down to the pipes. And I did not argue because engineers don't argue with a failed beam, we document it. I said, "Okay, Mom, I'm sorry I asked." I picked up my keys, complimented the pot roast, and drove home. That was the night I stopped asking. And I want you to remember the exact shape of that sentence she chose, because in 8 weeks she was going to hear it again, word for word, from me. The next Sunday, for the first time in years, I didn't go to dinner. I didn't announce it or make a point of it. I just stayed home, and the machine noticed immediately. By 2 o'clock, Aunt Deb called. "Your mother is beside herself, Fonda. She says you snapped at her over nothing. You know how she is? Just come to dinner." By 4, my dad left a voicemail about the weather, a long ramble about rain moving in Tuesday, and then 5 seconds of silence at the end where a different sentence lived and died. He never managed to say it, whatever it was. By 6, the group chat posted photos of the table with my chair empty, and the caption, "Missing someone today." Here is the part I need you to understand, because it's the part I'm least proud of. At 6:30, I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot, and I paid the water bill for Cardinal Lane from my phone. Autopay had flagged the card. It took 2 minutes to fix. The woman they'd erased, sitting in a Kroger parking lot, quietly making sure their showers ran hot. My best friend Jess, a nurse who has seen everything, met me for coffee that week and listened to the whole thing with her hands around her cup. She asked one question: what would happen if you just stopped? I opened my mouth to answer and nothing came out. Stopping had never actually been on my list of options. It felt less like a choice, and more like sawing through my own beam. I told her I'd think about it. What I actually did was drive over that Wednesday to fix their dripping bathtub faucet, and that's the visit where I saw the business card. Before I tell you what I found, let me stop for 1 second, because I've been where some of you are right now. If you've ever sat in a parking lot paying a bill for people who just told you you've never done anything, tell me in the comments what kept you writing the checks. I'm asking honestly, because back then I couldn't answer it myself. And if this is starting to sound like your Sunday dinners, hit subscribe, because what I found pinned to that refrigerator 6 weeks before the party changed everything I thought I knew about my parents. Here's what happened. I let myself in on Wednesday with my toolbox, and the house was empty, both of them at some church function. On the refrigerator, pinned under the Ohio-shaped magnet, half hidden behind a coupon sheet, was a business card. Heavy stock, navy lettering, Kessler and Associates, Estate and Elder Law. A handwritten time on the back. Thursday, 10:15. I stood there longer than I should have. My parents lived on my dad's disability check and would not spend $40 on a plumber, which is why my number was the one they called. Estate lawyers bill hundreds an hour. For what? They owned a 12-year-old Buick and a garage full of Christmas decorations. The house wasn't theirs to plan around, and they knew it, no matter what story ran at St. Bridget's. While I was still staring, the kitchen door opened and my mom came in with grocery bags, saw where my eyes were, and moved faster than I'd seen her move in years. The card vanished into her purse. Church directory ad, she said, smooth as icing. They're everywhere. Then she offered me coffee, sweet as pie, and I drank it, and we both performed normal. I fixed her faucet. I drove home. I did not stop thinking about the card. The following Sunday answered every question I had, plus several I hadn't thought to ask. My parents were at the 10 o'clock service, and I was at the house swapping a washer in the kitchen faucet, and I needed plumber's tape, and the junk drawer didn't have it, so I went to the roll-top desk in the den where my dad keeps tape and twine and 40 years of rubber bands. And there it was. Not hidden, exactly. Filed in the open slot, thick as a phone book's ghost. A manila folder with my mother's handwriting across the front in blue ballpoint, Family Legacy. You already know I opened it. The first page was a letter from Kessler and Associates addressed to my parents. The second was a document with a title I read 3 times before my hands got the message: Quitclaim Deed, Draft. Grantor: Fonda Ferrell, an unmarried woman. Grantees: Raymond and Carol Ferrell. My name, typed by a stranger, on a paper built to move my house out of my hands. Under it, a draft of new wills for both of my parents. The house on Cardinal Lane, upon their passing, to their son, Dustin Ferrell. Not one mention of me in any clause of any page, except on the line where I was supposed to sign myself away. I stood in the den hearing my own pulse, and then I found the sticky note. Yellow, square, stuck to the inside cover in my mother's hand, 4 lines that turned my spine to rebar. Anniversary. After the toast. She won't say no in front of everyone. I looked out the den window at Ruth's peonies coming into bloom along the back fence, and I understood, fully and finally, what the something special was. The party wasn't a party. It was a closing. And I was the asset. I want to tell you, I threw the folder across the room. I didn't. I sat down in my dad's desk chair and read every page like a site report, because the details were about to matter enormously. The lawyer's letter was careful, the way lawyers are careful, but the shape of the plan was all there. Step 1. Present the quitclaim deed at a family gathering, framed as legacy planning, signature to be notarized on site. A notary was already arranged. I recognized the name, Sandra from my mother's parish council, who stamps documents at the credit union. Step 2, if I declined, was sketched in a paragraph that made my skin crawl. The letter noted the family could explore a claim that I'd purchased the home as an arrangement for my parents' benefit, that such claims were, quote, difficult and fact-dependent, but that litigation pressure often brings family members to the table. Translation, in plain English, the case was weak, and the plan was to use the cost and the shame of it as a crowbar. There was an invoice too. A retainer had been paid, $1,500, in March. I sat there doing the ugly arithmetic. People who couldn't cover a furnace had found money to lawyer up against their own daughter. I laid each page flat on the desk and photographed it with my phone, front and back, in order. Then I put everything back exactly as I found it, squared the folder to the slot, and wiped my thumbprint off the brass drawer pull with my sleeve, feeling like a burglar in a house I owned. I was sliding the desk closed when gravel popped in the driveway. Both car doors. My mother's church heels on the porch steps. I picked up the plumber's tape and walked back to the kitchen sink, and my voice, when I called out hello, sounded almost completely normal. Monday morning, I took a personal day and sat in the office of Alan Boyd, a real estate attorney, a colleague at my firm swears by, a gray-haired man with reading glasses and the bedside manner of a good surgeon. He went through my fireproof box page by page, the purchase agreement from 8 years ago, the settlement statement, the recorded deed, the lien release. And then he read my phone photos of the family legacy folder without one visible flicker of surprise, which told me how often he sees families do this to each other. His verdict came in clean sentences. The house was mine, sole and entire, bought at fair market value through a title company, and no court in Ohio was going to unring that bell. My parents, having no lease and paying no rent, were tenants at will. State law required 30 days written notice, and he advised giving 60, both for decency and for how it would look if things got ugly. As for the resulting trust theory in Kessler's letter, he called it a nuisance claim, long odds, but he tapped the desk when he said the next part. If they filed it before any sale, they could record a lis pendens, a flag on the title that would freeze the property in place for months, maybe a year, while the courts shuffled paper. Then he slid one photo back across the desk to me and pointed at the bottom of the retainer letter, at the signature block I hadn't enlarged. 2 signatures. My mother's looping hand, and under it, small and cramped and unmistakable, Raymond Ferrell, my dad. The man with the weather voicemails and the 5 seconds of silence. Alan took off his glasses. "Whatever you're going to do," he said, "do it before they file anything. I want to show you one more scene before I tell you what I decided, because without it, my mother is just a cartoon. And the truth is worse than a cartoon." That Thursday was Aunt Deb's birthday, dinner at her condo, and I went, because not going would have set off alarms I couldn't afford yet. After the cake, the sisters got to reminiscing, and somebody mentioned Ruth, and my mother started talking in a voice I almost didn't recognize, low and flat, with no performance in it at all. She talked about the 6 years Ruth lived in the back bedroom, how she changed those sheets every morning, spooned soup past that proud clenched jaw when the arthritis got bad, sat up nights in the hallway chair listening to her breathe. 6 years. And then she said, to her sister, not to me, "You know what I got for it? Not one thank you. Not one." Her whole face lit up for the grandkids, and I was the help. She folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. "Well, daughters do. Sunshine. That's how it was in my day, too." Deb laughed and changed the subject, but I sat there with my dessert fork in the air, watching my mother, and for about 5 seconds I saw the whole machine with the panel off. Somebody had erased her once, too. She'd served an invisible 6-year shift in that house, gotten nothing, and drawn the only conclusion the arrangement allowed. Love doesn't flow to the one who does the work, so make sure your son is never the one doing it. I felt something for her right then that was almost tenderness. Then I remembered the yellow sticky note in her handwriting. She won't say no in front of everyone, My mother knew exactly what it felt like to be me. She'd planned the party anyway. I'm an engineer, so before I condemn a structure, I test it one last time under controlled load. That Sunday, back at the dinner table, 5 weeks before the party, I gave my parents one final chance to be the people I kept hoping they were. I waited for a lull in Dustin's fitness equipment monologue and asked, in the mildest voice I own, "Question for you two. What would happen if I ever needed to sell this house?" The room changed pressure. My dad's fork stopped moving, and my mother laughed. One short, dry note, no humor in it at all, and looked at me the way you'd look at a child threatening to run away to the circus. "You wouldn't dare," she said. Then she set down her napkin and said the quiet part, slowly, so I'd absorb it. "It's not yours, Fonda." "Not really. A daughter doesn't own her family's home. She keeps it for the family." Keeps it. There it was, her entire constitution in one sentence. I was not the owner of what I'd bought and carried. I was the custodian, staffing a property that belonged, in some bloodstream way, to the name Ferrell, meaning eventually to the son. I looked at my dad. This was his moment, and we both knew it, and he studied his mashed potatoes like a man reading scripture. Signature number 2, silent as ever. I said, "Good to know," and passed the green beans, and finished dinner as pleasant as a stewardess. Then I walked out to my car, sat behind the wheel in front of the house I had owned since I was 26, and called a realtor friend from my bridge inspection days before I could talk myself out of it. "Renee, it's Fonda. I need to sell a property. Off-market, cash buyer, and quiet. How fast can it move?" I sat in my car outside the house I owned and hired someone to sell it out from under my own childhood. Renee didn't blink. She knew a local investor, Tom Reiner, who bought rentals in decent neighborhoods with cash and hated auctions, drama, and delays, in that order. The problem was the showing. You can't walk a stranger through an occupied house in secret, except my parents solved that for me. The following weekend, they left for their church's 2-day retreat in Hocking Hills, the same one they attend every June. Saturday morning, I let Tom Reiner and Renee in the front door of Cardinal Lane with my key. It's a strange thing, giving a tour of your own childhood. Here's the kitchen. New furnace quotes on the counter. Here's the den. Mine the desk. Here's the hallway where my height is penciled on the doorframe, age 6 through 13. Tom Reiner measured and photographed and made investor noises, and I walked behind him fighting a war nobody could see. Because the house fought back. It fought me with the smell of Ruth's lavender still living in the back bedroom, with her peonies blowing around outside the window, with 34 years of Christmases stacked in every corner. Twice I almost called it off. Twice I stood in that back bedroom hearing, "Don't learn it as late as I did." And twice I took out my phone and looked at one photograph. A yellow sticky note in my mother's handwriting. She won't say no in front of everyone. That note was load data. You don't argue with load data. In the kitchen, Tom Reiner clicked his pen and gave me a number. 285,000. Cash, as is. 3-week close. Then he looked around the room once more and said the thing that almost broke me. "Solid house. Somebody's been taking real good care of it." I said yes to the number, and then I did something that confused everyone at the table except me. I attached conditions, and every one of them protected the people who were about to call me a monster. I required a written agreement that the current occupants could stay 60 days after closing, rent-free, double what Ohio law demanded of me. I booked and prepaid a moving company for a date inside that window. And I put a deposit plus first month's rent on a clean 2-bedroom apartment in Huber Heights, 10 minutes from Dustin's place, ground floor, no stairs for my dad's back, and left the paperwork transferable to their names the moment they signed. Jess met me for coffee while the purchase agreement sat unsigned in my bag, and she stirred her cup and asked the fair question. "You're paying their deposit? After what they tried to pull?" I'd thought about it, and the answer came out solid. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it so that for the rest of my life, I never have to wonder who I was when it counted. That was the whole architecture of the thing, and I needed it to hold, Because the difference between what I was doing and what they had planned for me came down to exactly this. They wanted to strip me in secret and call it family. I was going to tell them the truth in daylight and hand them a soft landing on the way out. Nobody would see the difference at the party. I'd know. That night, I spread the purchase agreement on my kitchen table and Rivet supervised from the counter, and my pen stopped over the signature line for 2 full seconds. One breath. Ruth's voice. I signed. 21 days to closing, and the anniversary party waiting 4 days past the finish line, like a nail sticking out of a stair. Escrow is mostly waiting, and waiting is where secrets go to die, and mine almost died on a Tuesday night 12 days in. Someone knocked on my apartment door at 8:30, and it was Dustin, uninvited, holding a 6-pack of root beer like a passport, all grin. Sis was in the neighborhood. He had never once been in my neighborhood. He needed, it emerged over the next 20 minutes, $3,000 for inventory, ground floor, huge margins, pay me back by Labor Day, family rate. And the whole time he talked, the folder from the title company sat on my kitchen table, closed but labeled, edge of the logo showing, 4 feet from his elbow. I did the only cool-headed thing available. I set a magazine down on top of it mid-conversation, casually, the way you'd park a coffee cup, and I kept my eyes on his face. Then I told my brother no, first time in my life, and I'd rehearsed nothing. No, Dustin, I'm not doing that anymore. What happened next was almost worth the whole 8 years. He froze, mid-gesture, like a vending machine that ate the quarter. Pure system error. Charm was the only tool he'd ever needed, and he pressed the button twice more, warmer grin, sadder eyes, and got the same result. And I watched my brother up close and understood he wasn't a villain, he was a product. 29 years of applause for existing had built exactly this, a man who genuinely could not distinguish between being loved and being funded. He recovered fast and made it graceful. You good, sis? You seem different. At the door, he glanced back once, and his eyes crossed the kitchen table, the magazine, the sliver of folder underneath. Then he winked, and was gone, and I stood there listening to his car, unable to answer the only question that mattered. Did he see it? He hadn't seen it. I know because the party stayed on, the group chat stayed sunny, and my mother called twice that week about seating charts and whether I still fit the blue dress. Wear something nice, sweetheart. We have a surprise for you. The word surprise, from her, had the effect other mothers get with I love you. My whole chest went cold. Closing was set for 9 in the morning on the Tuesday before the party. I took another personal day. The title office smelled like toner and burnt coffee, and a young escrow officer walked me through a stack of paper half an inch thick. Sign here, initial here. And I signed my name so many times, it stopped looking like a word. The wire confirmation pinged Renee's phone at 9:38. Sandra, the notary's counterpart, some stranger with a stamp, pressed her seal into the last page, and that was the sound the ending made, a small dry crunch, like a footstep on gravel. The deed left my name the way it had arrived 8 years ago, quietly, on paper, without one member of my family in the room. $285,000, minus what the government would take later for capital gains, because the house had never been my residence, just my life. I want to be honest about what it felt like, because it did not feel like victory. It felt like signing a death certificate for someone who'd been sick a long time. The Sunday before closing, while they were at church, I had driven over one last time and dug up one root cutting of Ruth's peonies with a trowel and potted it in an old paint bucket. And that bucket rode home buckled into my passenger seat like a child. I was carrying it up my apartment stairs when my phone rang. Mom, sugar in her voice. Don't be late Saturday, sweetheart. You're going to want to be there for the toast. Friday night, I sat at my kitchen table and prepared for a party the way I prep for a structural hearing. 3 envelopes, white, labeled in my neatest engineer's print. Envelope 1, formal 60-day notice to vacate. Dated, compliant with Ohio law, stapled to Tom Reiner's signed letter confirming the occupant's right to stay those 60 days free of charge. Envelope 2. The Huber Heights apartment. Deposit receipt. First month paid. Floor plan. And the mover's confirmation. Everything transferable to my parents with one phone call. Envelope 3. A plain copy of the recorded deed history from the county. 8 years of it. Ending Tuesday. Public record. No commentary. I thought about adding a fourth envelope. The full ledger. Every payment. Every tax check. Every furnace and shingle. $250,000 and change over 8 years. All of it documented. I even printed it. Then I fed it back through the shredder. Because the numbers were never the point. Being seen was the point, and that ship had sailed, and I'd sold the harbor. Let me pause here. One last time. Because Saturday is coming, and after that, there's no more pausing. Before you see what happened at that party, I want to know, would you have signed their papers to keep the peace? Or done what I did? Put your answer in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you need to see how a quiet person ends a 40-year performance, make sure you're subscribed, because it starts in about 90 seconds. I laid the 3 envelopes in my bag, hung the blue dress on the closet door, and slept better than I had any right to. Whatever else is true about me, I have never once been late to an inspection. Saturday, 4 o'clock, Cardinal Lane. My mother had dressed the house like a witness. Grocery store flowers on every surface, white streamers on the mantel, the good lace tablecloth that only surfaces for funerals and triumphs. 30 people, give or take. Aunt Deb commanding the deviled eggs, cousins I see twice a year, a bench of church friends from St. Bridget's, and, noted calmly, filed immediately, Sandra from the parish council, in a floral dress, with her fat leather notary bag parked under her chair like a small dog. Nobody brings the stamp to a birthday cake. Dustin worked the room in a blazer, master of ceremonies, refilling drinks, landing jokes, magnificent at the only job he's ever kept. My dad shook hands by the window and did not look at me for more than a second at a time, which told me he knew the schedule. And under the gift table, behind a bag of tissue paper gift bags, sat the corner of a manila folder. Family legacy just visible in blue ballpoint. Everything in place. Every load accounted for. I stood by the window with a glass of lemonade I never drank, my bag with 3 envelopes hanging from my shoulder, and I watched my mother glow. She was good. I want that on the record. Warm, funny, gracious, 40 years of marriage worn like a sash. A stranger walking in would have seen a matriarch at the summit of a beautiful life, and only 2 people in that room knew the party had a second act with my name on it. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for since the den, since the sticky note, since April. My mother, radiant, tapping her spoon against her glass. Everyone, everyone. Before the cake, Ray and I have something special. She gave a toast first, and it was a good toast. 40 years, she said, taking my dad's hand, and the secret was simple. Family comes first. Family stays together. Family is the only thing you get to keep. Applause, misty eyes, Deb dabbing with a cocktail napkin. Then my mother turned to me with the warmth of a spotlight and held out her hand. Fonda, sweetheart, come up here. The room aimed itself at me, and I came up, because the trap doesn't spring until the weight is on the plate, and I had decided days ago that I would be standing on it in good shoes when it did. She bent down and produced the manila folder from under the gift table with a flourish she must have practiced, and she held it up like a game show prize. Ray and I aren't getting younger, she told the room, and we've done some planning to keep this house in the family forever, where it belongs. It's all drawn up. Just a little paperwork. She opened the folder to the flagged page, and there was my name, grantor, Fonda Ferrell, and there was a pen, burgundy, heavy, bought for the occasion. Sandra was sweet enough to bring her stamp, my mother said, and Sandra was already rising with the bag, and Aunt Deb started a soft clap that caught in patches around the living room. Dustin raised his soda from the back, delighted, innocent as weather. Sign it, sis. Phones came up here and there, the way phones do now at anything shaped like a moment. My mother pressed the folder toward me, and her eyes underneath the warmth were the eyes from the kitchen, ice under sun. Right there on the line, sweetheart, for the family. I took the folder. I read the page slowly, in front of everyone, the way I read anything with my name on it, and the room's applause faded into a shuffling, coughing patience. Quitclaim deed. Grantor conveys all right, title, and interest. I looked up at my mother and asked her quietly, a question shaped like an exit. Mom, do you want to tell them what this actually is? Or should I? A ripple. Her smile recalibrated maybe a quarter inch. It's just protecting the house, honey. Estate things. Sign it and we'll cut the cake. And here's the moment I need you to slow down and stand inside, because everything in my life since runs through it. I stood in that living room holding a pen, and both of my roads were completely visible. Road 1. Sign. The room claps. The cake gets cut. My mother kisses my cheek, and I remain a Ferrell in good standing forever. As the custodian, the wallet, the woman who keeps things for the family. It would take 30 seconds, and I had 30 years of practice. Road 2. The truth. Out loud. And everything after it. Forever. My eyes went, on their own, to the window, to the back fence, to the peonies past my mother's shoulder blooming for a woman who never got one thank you either. Being needed isn't the same as being loved, honey. Don't learn it as late as I did. I clicked the burgundy pen once, closed it, and set it down on the lace. Then I laid the folder face down on the table. Flat, final, the way you close a report. I can't sign this, I said. My mother's voice came out thin. Sweetheart, don't be dramatic. It isn't mine to give anymore. The silence had a texture, like the second after a load test fails, when everybody's still staring at the gauge. I kept my voice at inspection level, flat and clear, because facts don't need volume. 8 years ago, this house was 30 days from the auction block. I bought it. My name has been on the deed since I was 26 years old. I paid the mortgage every month. The taxes, the insurance, the roof, the water heater. Mom and Dad have lived here free since the day I signed. I heard Deb's breath from the egg table. A cousin whispered, deed, like a foreign word. My mother's face was doing something geological. And on Tuesday morning, I said, I sold it. It closed at 9 o'clock. This house belongs to a man named Tom Reiner now. Then I opened my bag and laid the 3 envelopes on the lace tablecloth, 1, 2, 3, next to the uncut anniversary cake. 60 days notice with 60 days free. An apartment in Huber Heights, deposit paid, 10 minutes from Dustin. And a copy of the deed record, in case anyone would rather check the county than take my word. Nobody moved. Then my mother detonated. The glass in her hand hit the tablecloth sideways, and 40 years of stage management went up in one scream, and what she screamed, I swear on Ruth's peonies, was the same sentence, the exact same sentence, pitched for the cheap seats. After everything we've done,